series offering practical insights and tools for companies and nonprofits to meet the changing expectations for the role that business plays in society. I'm Jeff Hoffman, Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy Institute leader at the ESG Center at the Conference Board. The Conference Board is the world's leading independent nonprofit think tank devoted to serving business and society for over 100 years. The ESG Center focuses on corporate governance, sustainability, corporate citizenship, and philanthropy. The Conference Board is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As such, we're committed to not only serving our members, but society at large. So that's why today's webcast is being made available to the public, and why we're making a wealth of resources on the COVID-19 crisis available to the public at our website, www.conference-board.org-covid-19. Today, we're going to be covering a very special and important topic, a window into the personal and first-hand account of a military caregiver. Across the U.S., there are 5.5 million military caregivers, the spouses, parents, and children caring for our wounded warriors at home. Military caregivers perform a wide variety of tasks, from dressing and bathing their loved ones to helping them cope with emotional difficulties. The challenges they face are unique and have only been magnified by the current pandemic. To discuss some of these challenges and how caregiving affects individuals, their families, and society, and to the extent that corporate citizenship and philanthropy plays a role addressing these challenges, I'm delighted to be joined by three guests. Kira Benson is a Florida-based military caregiver, mother, wife, and Elizabeth Dole Foundation Fellow. Molly Ramsey is Manager of Policy and Programs at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. And Lori Noonan is the Chief Development Officer at Camp Carill. We'll get back to them in just a moment. All right, first we have some housekeeping notes to cover. You can download the background materials and the slide deck for today's presentation in the Download section in the bottom of your screen. Please note that you can only access these materials if you're watching this program on a computer. You won't be able to download the materials from a smartphone or tablet. If you would like to receive any of the materials, please fill out your name in the chat box and we'll send them to you after the webcast. Second, note that the following CEU credits listed here are available for this program. If you would like to receive credits, please note that you have to stay online for the entirety of the live webcast and place your name, email address, and credit type needed into the designated box below. For those who want CPE credit, you need to enter your full name, email address, specify CPE in the Request CPE credit space at the bottom of your screen. Please note that 3 pop-up messages will occur during the program to confirm your participation. Not that you would be sneaking out, but just to make sure. Please click OK each time you see one. Third, I want to underscore that we welcome audience participation in today's session. You can ask questions at any time by entering them into the chat box at the bottom left of your screen. We will work them into the conversation as time permits. Finally, a few other housekeeping notes. Please complete the evaluation form at the end of today's session so we can incorporate your feedback into future webcasts. You can share this program with your colleagues after the fact, as it will be viewable on demand in a day or two. You can enlarge the video to full screen by full screen view by clicking on the 4 arrows in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And now, with that out of the way, it is an honor to welcome our first guest, Kira Benson. Kira has a really personal story that she is going to share with the group. So welcome, Kira. Please tell us your story.
Well, thanks for having me here today. It's always good to be here to talk about not only my story, but those other 5 million caregivers out there. So I am a military caregiver. I am a caregiver to my husband, who is a catastrophically injured veteran. And catastrophically injured, to kind of unpack that a little bit, is this kind of fancy term that means he no longer can perform every activity of daily living without help. So things that we take for granted, bathing, dressing, transferring, mobility, those are all considered kind of activities of daily living. And so that's my role. And I like to talk about my role because when we think about military caregivers and we think about wounded veterans, we tend to think of Kodak moments. The coming homes, the Walter Reed, shots, the welcome home shots with the babies, and they're beautiful and they're wonderful and they ought to be Kodak moments. But what we often don't see is what goes on behind the scenes, and so that's why I am so happy to be here and talk about a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes, because my husband and I don't have a traditional story. We don't have a Walter Reed story. My husband was injured in 2000 when he had a parachute malfunction, and he still hates when I use that term because it opened, it just didn't stay open. And he had a double car bomb blast go off too close in front of him. So while he kept all of his limbs, we didn't have that traditional, medevac from theater. And my husband was injured in 2003. And just like every other wife with an injury, you figure out what happens, you go through all of that medical uncertainty. We thought everything was fine because he came back, and he came back with all his limbs, and we didn't really like to think about the fact that he couldn't feel his legs all the time, or that running became a chore, that he was very forgetful. So, and we're old folks. He left the Army in 2007, so a lot prior to that time where everybody was screened for TBI upon returning from deployment, and we didn't have that support. So he did 2 tours. We exited in 2007. He had a host of medical issues, but no real answers about those issues. And we kept kind of digging through, what medical looks like. We know things weren't perfect, but it's that insecurity of where do you go from here? And I think even when you're in a Walter Reed situation, you have that too. You have what we call that initial medical insecurity. Is he going to make it? What's the immediate after effects? But no one really talks to you about long-term. Definitely no one talked to us about 13 years down the road, your husband would be wheelchair-bound, be unable to move his legs all the time, be unable to control the nerves in his hands, be losing cognitive decline. No one talks to you about that at the beginning, and so there's always this medical insecurity. And when you get out, you obviously don't have TRICARE anymore, and you go to find employment in the hope that you can have all that kind of security to back you up. And for my husband, he really struggled with employment. Prior to exiting, he went as an officer. He had 2 bachelor's degrees. He exited, and still within, and of course it was a bad time. I think we all remember kind of the crash of '09 and trying to get things done. But still, his longest term job after exiting was a janitor. And here's a man with a bachelor's degree and who is working on a master's degree. And one of the things we learned very quickly, and was even told to him by someone who was helping him through vocational rehab, was to take his veterans experience off of his resume. Said it was, at that time, in that time frame, it was never a good thing to send a resume out with veterans experience. They couldn't understand the jobs and how they translated. My husband led a platoon in combat, and his other deployment, he was head of the Baghdad reconstruction. So he was the right-hand man to generals and ambassadors, and worked in the embassy, and we kind of call it our golden deployment because it was simple, but he led billions of dollars of reconstruction. And then he gets out, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're 27. You can't have done all this." So that translation was an issue for employment, and he stayed underemployed for many years until, ironically, until 2016. And then what happened right after 2016 is he continued to decline, and for the first time we got medical answers. So if you're tracking, he was injured in 2000, 2003, and by 2018 we finally had a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury and encephalopathy. And he was removed from work because his injuries were so significant. By 17, he couldn't go through a whole day of work. Cognitive dissonance was extremely big. That means like lack of memory, loss of memory, lack of orientation to year, time, date. All of that started to dissipate. Again, that medical that nobody tells you about. And so he was removed from work. And now we've lost income. And I continued to teach college part-time as I started taking care of him as he needed more and more help. And then there was a time when even that couldn't happen. So now not only has he lost income, and of course you file for benefits and you're on the wait list for benefits, and I lost my income, and along with me stepping down from my position as a professor, we lost any private insurance. So there's the medical insecurity is kind of wrapped up in that, everything that happens, but also that lack of support. Since we've lost private medical insurance, it's harder to get things covered, it's harder to get things done. The only coverage my husband has in the VA is that, and sometimes the VA is really good, other times it's like moving mountains. So that does lead to issues. We personally had to buy my husband's first wheelchair, which is not a cheap expense. So you're already on kind of a fixed income, and then you have to, go provide that. We are a very typical veteran family in the fact that post-deployment, we had children. We have 5 children. Of those 5 children, 2 of them have special needs. And so there's kind of that added expense, if you will, too. And if you don't know, for veterans who've deployed to the Middle East, our special needs percentage in our children is around 8%. Which is a lot higher than the normal average population, which is about 3.8%. And funnily enough, that 3.8% also includes reservists who've deployed. So it kind of crosses in that sense. But when you look at just straight active duty veterans who've deployed, they come back. We have 8% of our children have special needs, are on spectrum. Out of our 5 children, like I said, 2 are special needs. And therapies, and those of us who have special needs kids, we know this, therapies aren't always covered. So back to kind of everything that goes on, you're paying out of pocket for that. So I don't know, I feel like I went kind of all over the place. So your husband gets out, you find out he's injured, you try to make life look normal again, which is what we did for a very long time, and then you watch him decline, you watch no answers come in, you have children. During this whole entire point, right after my husband got out, he spent 2.5 months in a coma, in a hospital facility. 10 of days of that was in a coma, from things that he suffered when he was abroad. And so you kind of, you never know when it's over. We still don't know when it's over. We're still fighting for answers. And it's hard to talk about the point that's all that background that nobody sees. There's also the unspoken financial burden. Obviously we live on a fixed income. I've lost my career. I joke that my career is now taking care of him, which is perfect. But most of us caregivers are not paid for that career. At the time you lose your medical insurance, we've cashed out an IRA. We paid for the wheelchair by cashing out my IRA. You don't necessarily have that 401(k) or the 401(k). And you're drained for medical care, whether it be for your injured veteran or whether it be for, in our case, our children. Sometimes therapies for our children in the history have run about $1,200 a month. And so you have all of that. We have a very high percentage of injured veterans who are on food stamps, Medicaid, living in Section 8 housing, just to kind of get through the month, to afford those therapies, to afford what they can for both us and our kids. That kind of raises something that's very personal with us right now is housing difficulties. So I mentioned my husband is wheelchair bound at this point. And some of you may get this. If you are ever looking for housing with a family of 7, it's fun to begin with because there's not a lot that fits that. And then you add on the topic that now we need wheelchair accessible. So, and to overall, we actually ended up selling our house. We had this really cute 1951, home where every single wall was load bearing, and you couldn't fit a walker through the bedroom doors. And so here we had to sell our house. It was unavoidable. You go to look at other houses. There are not a ton of adaptable houses. We're talking $100,000 easy to rehab a house after that. And so you find where you need medical care for whether it be your veteran or your children or whatnot, and where you need housing, don't always interconnect. So now we're moving and you lose all those roots for the kids. You lose your support systems, whether they be work, whether they be family. You lose all that. And we recently moved to Florida because it happened to be that beautiful point where medical care for him, he needs a lot of specialty care, and medical care for my children intersected, and we were offered an adaptive house to rent on a base. So it kind of all like golden circled line up, but there's a lot of us still stuck in this, how do we get housing that fits us all, meets needs, meets codes, that he can move around in, and afford it. Because obviously many of us are on, like I said, fixed incomes. And all of that really affects the family dynamics. And I think that's something that we don't see a lot in the discussion about what goes on when you become a caregiver. We talk a little bit now about caregiver stress, caregiver burnout, and that's a very true thing, getting respite care. But we don't talk about those loss of dreams. My husband and I have been married 15 years. When we got together, we made all sorts of dreams. We were going to go hike the Appalachian Trail. You think about all those things that you made when you were young and healthy and whole, and those go away. And so there's all that stress of, okay, now we have to make new plans. How far can we go without medical care? Or, how far away from medical care can we go? Can we get your pills if we travel abroad? There's, if something happens, can we get the same level of medical care? Those are all things we don't talk about. The stress of disabilities in the household. And I talk about my children a lot too. My kids will never know what it's like to go do certain things with Dad. And we're very active. We've adapted a lot in our home. He has a hiking wheelchair. We go out and bike. But that thought of, well, I just want Dad to drive me to the store so I can get Mom a birthday present. Well, Dad can't drive anymore due to the TBI and syncope and seizures. And so it's the small things that start not only stressing the family dynamic, but stressing the children, and stressing kind of that extended family too, which I've heard a lot of feedback, especially when it's what we call an invisible injury. It's very apparent when you have an amputee, and not that the challenges aren't similar, but there's always this kind of, well, why can't he get up and walk? He has both of his legs, It's really hard to start to explain, and even for the kids to explain to their friends, well, Dad's in a wheelchair because, yes, he has his legs, but they don't work right. The nerves are shutting down. So you get all that strain, you lose your support systems, whether it be work and family and friends, and you lose your roots, and this is the stuff we don't converse about openly, and so that's kind of where I like to bring some attention to.
All right. Well, Kara, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. I think what you were talking about with, for so many, it is invisible. And when you talked about that Kodak moment at the beginning, and that is usually what we see. And, we're applauding our warriors, our heroes, but yet you have been living with this for so long now, and your children have been living with it, and all the different facets of how this has changed your life. I think when you were talking about the stress on your children, because obviously you have 5 children, and in a way they're caregivers too. You're all part of the family there, and Lori is going to talk to us a little bit about that stress on the children and the release and opportunities to experience some of that joy that, unfortunately, as you said, Dad's not going to be able to do this with us or that. So, Lori, tell us a little bit about Camp Carill and the toll this takes on kids.
Sure, absolutely. So first off, I'd love to introduce Camp Carill to you. So Camp Carill to date has served 24,000 children of wounded, ill, injured, and fallen military heroes. And we typically do that through a traditional 1 week of summer camp. We provide it free of charge to military children. We host 22 sessions in 19 different states. Now, why is this important? Two of the main things that summer camp traditionally offers as benefits to children, especially military children, is the ability for connections. One of the things that we heard Kara talk about is the loss of connections and support systems. And that is a very real thing that children of military families need, especially when they're dealing with a parent who left for duty and came back a different person. And so it's really important that we're able to give them those support systems. And then also mental wellness is a very big piece. One of the things that you will hear a lot from military children is that they need to be able to take a break and just be a kid. They take on so much responsibility, and they often are so concerned. They're waiting for, pardon, but the shoe to drop again. They're waiting for something else to happen, and so giving them the opportunity to just get away, to experience, to have this time for themselves, to be individuals. And it's not always about the military. It's not always about the disability and what's going on at home. It's their opportunity to just be a kid. And some of the things that we've learned from summer camp is that as a result of attending Camp Carill, we've heard from parents that the children are more confident. They come back better able to work through challenges. They're better able to handle stress, and they're also a little bit more apt to talk about issues with adults rather than just keeping them in. So all military children are accepted through Camp Carill, but we do place a priority on wounded, ill, injured, and fallen children of wounded, ill, and fallen. A big focus is their lack of connectivity. So we have a family that shared with us that they, I'm sorry, I really can't read. Oh my goodness. They have a family, we have a family that talks a lot about their inability to connect with their friends, and they aren't able to they live in a military community and they aren't able to find other families who also have an injured parent. So this is an opportunity for the children to have that experience. 96% of the children who attend are children of wounded ill. The other percent, the 4%, are fallen, and they have parents who have not come home. 24% of our children are from a dual military household, and 50%, many of the families actually express serious concerns about mental health, and also 10% of our families experience self-harm. %30 of our families are from caregiver roles. Now, we have experienced where this is our first year to actually ask about caregiver roles. We have a suspicion that it's much higher. So we are thinking that it's probably going to be up in the 60% range. Unfortunately, at this point, we're right at 30%. And what we're doing is really trying to emphasize programs to serve those caregiver children. Our primary focus for Camp Carill is respite. So big focus that you heard Kara talk about is the ability to respite, to get away from those cares and concerns. So one of the big things that we're trying to do this year is, as of course with COVID, we have experienced some serious changes in our programming, and one of them is actually we've had to not do summer camp this year. Obviously, we want to be as careful and concerned about children as we possibly can. So what we've done this year is we are doing some virtual programs. Our first virtual program that we're doing is a pen pal program, and we're really focusing specifically, the pen pal program is designed to help facilitate those connections that typical children need, but even more so military children need. So it gives them the opportunity to continue to find new friends, maintain those friendships, and talk about issues that are really affecting them. Also, our next program that we're working on is our virtual art program. Virtual art program is really designed to give the opportunity for the entire family to respite together. They're having the opportunity to learn from one another, kind of just work through art programs so that they can actually begin to work through some of their issues. We're working with Creative Vet, who has really made this a priority in helping families work through TBI and PTS so that they are able to use art as a form of expression. Our other program that we're going to be working on is a virtual program designed specifically for caregivers. And that actually is going to be, first off, we are working on focus groups. And what we're hearing in our focus groups is from parents, we're hearing that, the majority of them recognize that their children are caregivers. We're also noticing that a lot of parents don't identify their children as caregivers. And so, but whenever they explain the role of their child in their home, one of the things that they say is that, they give the description of, well, they help with medicine, and well, they help with helping me get from, room A to room B. And so, or they help with their siblings. So at this point, we're pretty confident that the numbers are going to be much higher. But as we're doing the focus group, what we're doing is putting together a lesson plan based on needs that have been identified from the children as well as the parents. And we are putting together the lesson plan, and from there we will be doing virtual programming specifically for the children to learn how to self-care and to respite at home, because those two things are probably the biggest that we hear from parents and from families, is that, one, depression, anxiety, their children need some opportunities to get away from the responsibilities. We heard from one parent that their house has to be kept quiet. It has to be very still. It has to be dark. That's a result of a traumatic brain injury for this particular person, and this is what helps, the wounded warrior to better cope. And so one of the things that, the parent was really concerned about, without the children being able to leave the home and go to a summer camp program, go to school, those types of things, that, they don't have that opportunity to just get away. And to be able to be loud like children like to be, and to experience what normal families experience, and that is a really big piece as well. The last piece of what we're doing on a virtual stage is, of course, doing summer virtual programming or virtual camps, where we're also sending the camp gear to the kids so that they kind of feel like they got to go to camp, but not really. So that is a big piece too. It's just making sure that we're continuing to keep the kids connected, and that we're continuing to help them find ways to, respite, build their self-confidence, and their connections and support. From there, we're going to be talking about support and what you can do. So I will let it go.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Lori. I mean, obviously, this is a good example of how this pandemic has had a negative effect on your operations. I mean, you see those, photos of these cute kids who are, out on the water and doing other things that they aren't able to do, and the fact that you were able to, quickly pivot and go virtual. But it actually sounds like there were a couple of silver linings in going virtual, where, potentially reaching more people than you would with the actual camp, and also where you were doing things with the whole family together that you had mentioned, like with the art therapy.
That's right.
So, that's what I think we've learned to deal with COVID-19, that there are some benefits that have come out of it. Although, if I was a kid, I'd rather be out there playing and doing what they were doing at your wonderful camp than doing what we're doing, yet again, staring at our computer screens. But it is our current reality right now. So thank you for all you're doing for those kids. We really appreciate it. So right now, let's transition on to the work of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We've talked a lot about, okay, what can we do? When we had our prep call for this, and I first met Kara. In fact, this is my third time being with Kara, and it was like, okay, I just want to, one, reach out and give her a big hug, but two, what can we do? And the Elizabeth Dole Foundation has been there doing just that. So we're fortunate to have Molly today to talk to us and give us a little bit about the data of what is out there and how we can all help. So, Molly.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening in. Like Jeff said, my name is Molly Ramsey. I'm the manager of policy and programs here at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. And we're super excited to have Kara, who is one of our Dole Caregiver Fellows, just sharing her story. Her story is unique, but also similar to the 1.5 million military and veteran caregivers. So just to give a little bit of background of who the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is and what we do is we were founded in 2012 after Senator Elizabeth Dole spent about 11 months with her husband, Senator Bob Dole, in Walter Reed Hospital. They were at an event at the World War II Memorial here in D.C., and they noticed that something was off. And due to his age and just his injuries from World War II, they decided to take him up to Walter Reed, and from there they stayed for about 11 months. And during that 11 months, she was witnessing and meeting spouses, mothers, fathers, siblings, friends come to Walter Reed because they did receive that phone call in the middle of the night of something happened, he's going to be at Walter Reed, meet us there. And we've heard anecdotally time and time again is you're going through that, Kara mentioned, it's kind of that medical, you're kind of almost medically secure because you're figuring out is he going to make it, but at least like you're not the medical professional. You're trusting that your loved one with people who are trained in this. But what happens once they go home? We've heard one of our Dole caregiver fellows say she was handed a grocery bag full of heavy dose medications and serious medications and said, okay, well, here's the times that he needs to take them. Good luck. But what does that mean? And so Senator Dole saw that and wanted to start a foundation and really raise the voice of those who are not always seen. There are those Kodak moments of people coming home and kissing the babies. There's also the parades to honor those wounded warriors, but someone got them into that chair. They got them dressed that day. They got them calmed down before any environmental triggers. So we're here to really raise the voice of 5.5 million. And so this is just a little bit of our mission and vision is we want to empower and strengthen the military and veteran caregivers. When we hear the Speaker of the House, when she's taking the gavel, say veterans, service members, families, and caregivers, that was a huge win for us. The President now says that, and so it's been a huge, we're a relatively young foundation in this military and veteran space, but we've been able to get a lot done, and that's due to Senator Dole's vision, but also stories like Kara's that are able to really raise that awareness. And so a lot of people, as I mentioned, Kara's story is unique, but it's also very similar to others. And so in 2018, we created a Dole Caregiver Experience Map, and I've linked it here. And so if you download the presentation, you're able to explore that website. And what we try to do is try to make it as civilian speak as possible. There is no one circle fits all, but we try to pinpoint different landmarks of, okay, someone came home, you're starting to notice some things are different, you're starting to take on more of the household responsibilities, depending on your relationship with that care recipient, and things start to happen, things start to change, your dreams and visions that you had before are starting to dwindle. And then you move into, as you can see on the screen, a darker green part, and that's kind of what we call the transition period. You're starting to get diagnoses, you're starting to kind of come up with a treatment plan, you're getting comfortable. And then in the blue phase, we call that finding the rhythm. And you're just really, you have the medications down, you have the treatment plan down, you have your appointments, things are okay. And we made this a circle because we recognize that caregiver life is a cycle. You're going to go through this cycle multiple times. No matter how great your life seems in that finding the rhythm stage, something could come up and just swing you right back through it. And so the goal of creating this was not only to educate people who aren't familiar with military and veteran caregivers, but also to allow for organizations and any individual really to kind of pinpoint where can they fit in to help military and veteran caregivers, so when they go through this cycle again, it's not as bumpy as the very first time. We want people to be able to go through this cycle a lot quicker because they have so many tools in their toolbox that they can reach into and utilize. So probably a lot of people are saying, well, what are we doing here today? How can I help, or how can my organization or company really step up? And there are a multitude of ways. There's not, again, one size fits all. It's really, the big step is just understanding that military and veteran caregivers are out there. There are 5.5 million, and that number is probably drastically different because we did the RAND study back in 2014, and we're trying to pinpoint exactly where that number may be nowadays. And so one easy thing is such as employment for military and veteran caregivers. As Kara mentioned, she had to step back from her job. That comes with a heavy decision of, okay, how are we going to do insurance? How are we going to have retirement? Because your professional life stops, but you do have a retirement age, and there are benefits, and how do I keep going with my life? So one of the things that we've created with our partners at AARP and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Hiring Our Heroes Foundation was employment strategies. Whether it's just even majority of organizations nowadays, when you post a job on LinkedIn or Indeed, there's a little disclaimer at the bottom that you're veteran friendly. And a few years ago, it was adding military spouse to that disclaimer language, that that this company understands that we would like to hire military spouses and veterans and transitioning service members. And we're now challenging people to identify caregivers in that. Just marking yourself as a caregiver-friendly organization. And there are a multitude of ways that you can be a caregiver-friendly organization, and they can be as high cost as you would like or as low cost to no cost as possible. Whether it's just trying to do a survey of your workforce to better understand who people are they a veteran, are they caregivers, and it can be anonymous because part of the challenge is there's a lot of fear of identifying yourself as a military spouse or a military caregiver, because that does mean to a company that there are challenges. There may be days out of work. There may be a move coming up. And I feel like this is very poignant in today's times because of everything that is happening in the world. The workforce has completely had to change. And it had to change pretty much as I feel like everyone, no matter where you were in the country, it was about mid-March, everyone went. Our lives went upended, and we had to figure out this whole virtual world. This is a world that military spouses and caregivers have really thrived in. This is where they've thrived in working. And especially now with COVID-19, anyone can become a caregiver at a drop of a hat. And so this guide here, yes, is it targeted towards military and veteran caregivers? Yes. But it can also help any type of caregiver, whether it's for a child or an aging parent, to really kind of understand what these people are going through and how you can better yourself as an employer for your workforce. And so I definitely encourage you all to explore this guide. We have some tips in the back of ways that caregivers can be engaged, and also just how hiring practices and recruitment practices and retaining practices can really be influenced once you kind of learn a little bit more about them. And so some other corporate examples that I would like to highlight where some of our partnerships here, and I've linked the different websites and platforms that we work with. One of the things, LinkedIn, Philips, Prudential, USAA, these are just a few of our partners that we work with who approached us and said, we have this, here's our wheelhouse. How can we tailor it, or how can we market it to military and veteran caregivers? For example, LinkedIn, they have a partnership with the Department of Veterans Affairs where they offer their LinkedIn premium subscription to military and veteran caregivers. So they have access for free for 1 year to really just highlight all those courses that people would like to utilize to potentially get back into the workforce, or just a caregiver may not be ready to get into the workforce in 2020 or 2021 even, but maybe in 2022. And so they can take this time where you're sitting at the VA and an appointment, but you're not able to go in because of things that are going on, or you're not allowed into the waiting room or into the visit room, but you're able to just knock out a course from LinkedIn Premium. Those are those types of things. Caregivers don't have a whole lot of downtime, but there are a little bit of wiggle room where you can take some of these courses. Our partners at Philips, I mentioned our caregiver experience map, and they do wonderful work with human experience design. They have a great partnership with the Department of Veterans Affairs to really help veterans and family members and caregivers who are in remote areas get access to mental health care, which is very important. And so they just use that human-centric design to help us create this military and veteran caregiver experience map. Our friends at Prudential, they said, hey, we're a financial establishment. We want to create these courses or target or market some of our courses that we know would work for military and veteran caregivers to get it to military and veteran caregivers. And so what they did was they pulled together some of their other courses that they had previously created and just put them into this platform called for Hidden Heroes, which is our term for military and veteran caregivers. So that is something that they had already had that, but they just reworked it and put it into a new platform where it was targeted and marketed to military and veteran caregivers. And then USAA is one of our longstanding partners. They approached us when we found that one of the biggest challenges that caregivers face is that I mentioned earlier with the LinkedIn courses is some caregivers aren't allowed into the visit rooms. They're not allowed to talk to the doctor because of concerns about HIPAA and just other cultural challenges that are at the VA. And they stepped up and said, we want to solve this problem with you. And they have been working with us to create this campaign for inclusive care where we're educating providers at the VA and even in the civilian medical field of military and veteran caregivers can be a real team member to your physicians. They're the ones who are seeing the day-to-day challenges where in a visit room, the veteran may say, no, I'm fine, I haven't had these triggers. Whereas the caregiver is going to be in the background, and I see Carill laughing of like, no, we had one of those triggers last week, or no, this medication's acting a little wonky. So caregivers are real, they're just an integral part, and so we're educating providers on how to use and leverage the caregiver's knowledge and their experience to better serve a veteran, which is always the VA's goal. And so those are just a couple of examples, whether it's just remarketing things that are already established, or working with an organization, or even working with, if you identify a caregiver in your workforce, how just approaching them and say, hey, we want to do better to serve you and other people like you. That's something that we have always seen as huge success. It's great for me, who's sitting here in Washington, D.C., who I've lived in a military household and my mom was a caregiver, but it's always great to hear it from someone who's lived it. And caregivers are great because they don't hide anything. They don't hold back because they want to, their challenges, they want to improve so the next caregiver doesn't have to face those challenges. And that is probably the best part about working in this community and learning from this community is the resiliency is just outstanding. And I think especially during these times of this global pandemic, we can learn so much from our family caregivers, especially our military and veteran caregivers, because you can be diagnosed with COVID-19 and no one really knows what that looks like right now. Well, military and veteran caregivers can get that phone call in the middle of the night and something happens and you are thrown into the whirlwind, or it could be a slow thing of you didn't get that phone call in the middle of the night, but someone's coming home and you're starting to see those challenges. You're starting to see those changes, mood swings, triggers, forgetfulness, whatever it may be. And so I feel like nowadays we can really leverage what other experiences have been happening and people have had to really better our new normal as we move forward. And so I just wanted to offer some of our contact information. If you all have any questions, or if I'm hoping the links work in the downloadable presentation, but if you have any questions or anything, here's my contact information. We're happy to answer any questions or provide any resources. that you may need or just want to learn about. And so, Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Molly. In fact, I encourage all of you to take a good look at the Caregivers experience map. Molly did a good job explaining it, but when you really look at it in the detail, it's just overwhelming, and it actually brings to well, actually, Kira brought to life a lot of the things that are on that grid, but I think it's definitely worth your while to take a look at that, and appreciate you providing the other resources as well. We did have a comment in the chat box about a service, the Disabled Veteran Outreach Program, and Kira, I know you wanted to address that.
The thing I love to say about services is that, yes, there are services out there, and we often don't know a lot about them. So it's part of my role as a fellow, is to make sure that caregivers on the ground are aware of the services that are available to them and get them connected with the services they need. I think what it's always good to remember when we're dealing with services in VA and veterans and military is that there are programs there. Sometimes they're very limited. Sometimes they work miraculously slowly. And it's really the corporate world, I feel, that bridges the gap. One of the things I mentioned today was adaptive housing. So very exciting. We just saw a bill go to the House that renewed, if you have a veteran who is in need of adaptive housing, we just saw it go to the White House to be signed, that they would have more than one grant in their lifetime. As the way it was written is you get one large grant in your entire life, and if you ever move or if anything ever happens, then you never get that ability to redo your house. What people don't understand is that grant is exceedingly hard to get. For people who are like in my husband's situation, he has a TBI that has caused neurological degeneration, which causes him his inability to walk. They only give about 30 of those a year, and that's actually written into the plan. If you're an amputee, you have a better shot at getting that, but the funding right now is already 3 years filled out, if I remember correctly. And Molly can correct me if my figures are wrong, but last I heard, the funding, those slots, if you will, are already taken for 3 years. So that's why you see these corporations pop up, or the nonprofits pop up, Building Homes for Heroes, Operation Finally Home, the nonprofits who are out there trying to help with housing, Gary Sinish's Rise Foundation. Why do we have that? Because a lot of us are saying, well, we already have this grant program. Why do we need that? And it's the nonprofits who have linked with the corporates who have helped that come into play, so that you have a veteran in a wheelchair who can't move around his home, instead of them waiting for those 3 to 4 years. And that doesn't even count. So it works like any other veterans claim. So it can take 6 months to a year to get those approved. Right now we have claims in that were filed in April of 2016 that have still not been decided. And COVID has stopped a lot of that too. So what we were hoping would get decided by a judge this month is going to take another year. So it's one of those things I like to pull up, because we can sit there and say, yes, there's this program and that program. There's military programs to help military spouses get employed, and in my situation, I don't have access to that. I'm not active, not an active duty wife. But to have LinkedIn step in and say, let's get your resume built so that if you can take part-time work at home, and it is one of the, I think, the benefits of COVID, even on the VA side, is we've learned to be a lot more adapted to technology, working out of the home. The VA has gone over quite a few teleconferences or video conferences now, and that ability has really helped things. But then you have it's this great opportunity. When we lived in Wisconsin, our VA was 2 hours away. Try explaining to an employer that I have to go to the doctor, but it's going to take 10 hours. So everybody goes, great, here's a video connect. Well, now you have veterans who may not have the digital capability, may not have the wireless, may not have the internet. So I know there was a corporation that came in and gave portals away to veterans through the Red Cross. Also, another corporation helping getting that Wi-Fi out there for those who need it. So it sounds odd to say, but there are always good programs, but it's really, in my opinion, kind of being in the trenches, it's that philanthropic side of the corporations that really help bridge the gap and help kind of boots on the ground, if you will, to use a military term if I can.
So, Kira, thanks so much for pointing out how corporations are helping. Hopefully that will give others on this call ideas on things that they might consider to support. Sadly, we are running out of time. I did want to mention something that we discussed on our preparation call, that Sunday marked the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we had a really good conversation about how that has helped, but also the things that people who are facing disabilities have to deal with, even though that there are these other accommodations that have happened. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I just want to give each of you an opportunity, 30 seconds, maybe even 15 seconds if you can do it, to just give us a closing comment. Molly, why don't we start with you, then we'll go to Lori, and then Kira, you can finish this up.
I just want to say thank you again, Conference Board, and Kira and Lori for joining and having us. I think one thing that we can all take away from, especially this time, is we're all trying to figure out the new normal and really looking at and trying to learn from other populations who have had to quickly adapt to their new normal is the best way to kind of figure out our own as we move forward. And again, if you all have any questions or anything about military and veteran caregivers, we're happy to be a resource or even brainstorm, or hopefully we were able to kind of get the juices flowing on some ideas of how you all can be active in the military and veteran caregiver community.
Great. Lori.
Yes. So I think that Elizabeth Dole Foundation has done a great job in coining the term of hidden heroes. And whenever we think of our nation's military, we look at them as heroes. But we oftentimes forget about those people who are at home taking care of those who have gone and fought for our freedom. And so I think this is a great opportunity to kind of bring awareness to that and to remember that it is the spouses at home who are doing it, the caregivers, and also the children. And so thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about it.
Sure.
And just our third, just thanks for letting us have the conversation and be here. We did talk about ADA, one of the prep calls, and one of the things that struck me the most, especially having a disabled spouse, the ADA has been such a blessing because you don't think of things until you need it. I always joke, we have a wheelchair van at 7 foot 1 inch. Try parking that in any downtown urban area. And we did. We brought it home. It didn't fit in the garage. I mean, things you don't think about. That's always kind of my joke. And the ADA has been great. But one of the comments in the prep call that just struck me very hard was to look at the ADA not as a retrofit, but to plan with the ADA in mind. And that was just, it was, I thought, the perfect comment on that. But all in all, thank you for listening, and thank you for being here, and thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, all three of you. I mean, this was, I think, really powerful. You know, Molly, Elizabeth Dole Foundation, the work that you're doing both advocacy-wise, making sure the resources get out there, creating partnerships, so important. You know, Lori, Camp Carill, what you're doing to help the kids is so important to, provide those opportunities, whether in normal times with experiencing the great outdoors or what you're doing virtually. And Kira, thanks for all you're doing, because on top of your role as a caregiver, wife, a mother, all of these things, you're also spending a lot of your own time helping others, helping those other 5.5 million caregivers out there, and being an advocate, and it's really, really critical. So we appreciate all three of you are doing on this important issue. What you see up on the screen right now, just want to remind you of some other issues or other topics that we're covering on webcast soon. You can go to our website, and I had mentioned the Conference Board COVID site, where you can see everything that is coming up that we're doing soon. So please take a look at that. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned something from today's webcast. I certainly did. And we in the corporate citizenship and philanthropy world have been standing, alongside our military families and our veterans for a long time. But I don't think we often take the time to peel back the onion and learn what we learned and heard today. So opportunities for you to learn more about what's happening in our corporate citizenship space. Please sign up. Anybody can. It's free for our corporate citizenship and philanthropy blog and newsletter. There's the subscribe button right there. Reminder that you can download the presentations from today. Also, at the end, be sure to complete the evaluation. Your feedback is important to us. We base how we present these webcasts, the topics, on your feedback. This is for you, and we want to be as helpful to our corporate community as we can. So again, thank you for being with us today. And from all of us at the Conference Board, please keep up the good work. This is a challenging time during the pandemic. And remember those who, as crazy it is for a lot of us, remember our caregivers, our military families, and our veterans who are not only having to deal with the situation that they have before them, but then add the pandemic on top of that. So thank you very much, and have a good day.